Welcome to America's Open Wound, the killing of the movement, the first of a planned 7-episode exploration of topics related to race in America, from the civil rights lunch counter sit-ins to different messaging by civil rights icons that included declarations of Black power or a desire to judge men and women by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. In future episodes, the series will consider the assassinations of 4 iconic social justice warriors: JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and RFK, all of which occurred within a 5-year interval, and their effects on the social justice movements. I am Herbert Dixon. For background about me, I am a retired judge and a former chair of the National Conference of State Trial Judges. I am also a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity since my undergraduate days at Howard University during the challenging times of turmoil that some of the 7 episodes will discuss. This docuseries will consider the effects of the war on drugs, the law and order campaigns, and mass incarceration. These discussions will reflect not only on African Americans, but Indigenous and other people of color. Loosely paraphrasing President Abraham Lincoln, this docuseries will examine the pernicious conflict between America's ideals and its reality. This series will also include the struggles of Black Americans overcoming racial barriers in the 1960s from a cross-section of individuals who lived the struggle, from the others who were champions of the struggle, and from young adults today, whether they are beneficiaries or victims. This docuseries will explore various understandings of our nation's past and what we foresee as its future. The focus for this first episode is law and order. I am a member of the baby boomer generation. I grew up in the Jim Crow South. The passage of the civil rights legislation in the 1960s resulted in my being permitted for the first time in my life to use certain water fountains and go through the front door of certain business establishments. I lived through the 1955 murder of Emmett Till, the 1964 kidnapping and murder of 3 civil rights workers outside of Philadelphia, Mississippi, and the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, that resulted in the deaths of 4 beautiful, youthful girls, 11 to 14 years old, attending Sunday school. And now, a generation later, we are confronted with the senseless death of more Black men and women. Does history merely repeat itself without society learning any lessons? This 7-episode series is being sponsored by the phenomenal brothers of Alpha Chapter of Omega Psi Phi fraternity.
I am Dr. David Marion, the current Grand Basileus of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity incorporated. I bring you greetings on behalf of almost 200,000 initiated men from 750 chapters in 15 countries. And it is an absolute honor for me to be here today to talk about this docu-series, America's Open Wound, the Killing of the Movement. I certainly want to thank Alpha Chapter for hosting this particular event. We know Howard University is where 5 of the Divine 9 organizations were founded, but its importance to the men of Omega far outseeds anyone because it is our birthplace. November 17th, 1911 is where our fraternity was founded at Howard University at Alpha Chapter. And so we're grateful for this chapter and all of the contributions that it has made to our fraternity and all of the giants that have come from Alpha Chapter. Just want to talk about this docu-series from my perspective. A lot of people don't know I was born in 1961 in Los Angeles, California. And my father was from Mississippi, and he had vowed never to return to Mississippi after his experiences here. But at the age of 9, he decided when I was 9 years old, he decided to move us back to Mississippi. And those memories of that time are very fresh in my mind, particularly as I live through the times in which we now live today. Never will forget coming to a small town in Mississippi and there be integration and segregation going on simultaneously. I never will forget seeing white only and black only restrooms and water fountains and entrances to medical clinics. Never forget getting sick, and my mother happened to take me into the clinic, and we wondered why we had not gotten service in a couple of hours, and it was because we had entered into the clinic into the wrong door. And so you could look through the reception area and see another lobby, and then the other lobby with poor furniture and uncarpeted floors were Black people, and we had not seen them when we entered. And so the America that I grew up with back in that particular time and coming to Aberdeen, Mississippi from Los Angeles, unfortunately is not that different from what we see today. We all do our separate things, but we all have come together for this one thing. So it's very important that we don't participate in this story continuing to be told in this country. We have to get out. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And so if you want things to be different, then you must act differently. And my charge to the men of Omega is going forward, we're going to act differently.
Good evening. Let me welcome our Grand Bosselist, Dr. David Marion, and thank him for his inspiring and personal story about the dark days of Mississippi. Let me also thank our brothers of Omega who have brought us greetings this evening. I'm Derickson Lawrence, proud alumnus of Alpha Chapter, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Inc., Howard University, and I will serve as your moderator for this evening's event, America's Open Wound, The Killing of the Movement, Episode 1. I'm pleased to introduce the three distinguished members of our panel. The first wears many hats. We all know him as the Majority Whip of the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman James Clyburn is in the House. Also with us is Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who hails from the battleground state of Florida, Florida's 24th Congressional District. Our third panel member is also very well known. He is known as the People's Attorney. Attorney Ben Crump is in the house.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's an honor to be joined with men who I have been in the trenches with so long. Congressman Whip Clyburn and I serve in Congress together, and he has traveled to Miami so many times to interact with the members of the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, and I have brought different chapters of them to Miami, and he's interacted with them to Washington, to DC with them, and they look forward to being with the highest ranking Black man in Congress. And Mr. Benjamin Crump and I, we call him the people's lawyer. He goes way, way back with me as we fought in the state legislature for all kinds of injustices and police brutality and marching in the street with college students and trying to change laws for the benefit of all of our people. It's fabulous to be joined with them tonight. Thank you for inviting me.
Brother Lawrence, I am so very honored to be on this august panel with two of my heroes. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson and I have certainly fought in our home state of Florida before she ascended to the United States Congress, and we continue to fight for those who have been victimized, marginalized, and disenfranchised. And Congressman James Clyburn, our fraternity brother, our hero, our leader. It is such a pleasure to be with him this evening to talk about how to uplift our culture, uplift our people, and uplift the future of our children. So thank you so much for allowing me to be with this panel to have these important conversations.
Thank you, guys. Thank all of you for allowing me to be here with two of my favorite people. Ben Crump is just a great friend, and I go to him often for consultation, and every now and then I get a text or something from him telling me how to do my job, and usually he's right. Thank him so much for all that he's doing in a very, very treacherous field to be operating in today. And I'm particularly impressed to be here tonight with Frederica Wilson. I've known Frederica for a long time, even before she came to Congress. We had mutual friendships with Carrie Meeks, and of course, working with her in the Congress gives me an opportunity to work with a very, very passionate person when she gets on to issues. I'm particularly impressed today, though, because I'm able to be on a panel with her while she's wearing her hat, which they won't let her do on the floor of the House. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you guys. I hope we can have a good evening.
First, we're going to frame the discussion with a video. And so we're going to let that play. Can you roll the video, please?
I cannot believe it's been 20 years. It has been a long, long journey.
An individual getting down on his hands and knees, raising his hands in the air and saying, "Don't shoot." This is a universal code for I surrender.
It's almost like I've been in a war. So I'm just trying to figure out, when does this stop? When these things happen, I am not able to rest. I am not able to be normal. There's normalcy for me went out the window when my son got murdered. So, I deal with a lot, a broken home, a destroyed family. But through the grace of God, I am able to do what I do.
Well, sir. Good. How are you? The reason I put you over to your brake lights are out. So you only have one active brake light, and that's going to be your passenger side one. Your third brake light, which is up here on top, and then this one back here is going to be out. You have your license and insurance?
I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
You just killed my boy. That wasn't me. He wasn't me.
Don't pull it out.
He wasn't.
Don't move.
Oh, man. Oh, my God.
Don't move.
Oh, my
Don't
God.
move.
Oh, my God. I'm shaking.
Don't move.
Don't move, baby.
Code 3. Get the baby girl out of here.
I shouldn't even be afraid to say it. America has a problem within its police force.
Man, I'm scared, man. I'm scared.
All right, what's your name?
George.
George Perry Floyd. Mama, I love you. Reese, I love you.
Yeah, mama.
Yeah, my kids, I love them. I'm dead.
You know, I don't know about you, but every time I see this footage, I get a lump in my throat. It's the depraved indifference to human life, especially when you see the little girl, she gets out of the car. And the sense is that it's shoot first and collect your thoughts later. And you know, this sense of this depraved indifference, it occurs whether it's with a gun or with a knee. So the question for the panel is, you know, is this a police culture issue, or is this something more deep-seated? I would like Congresswoman Wilson, then Attorney Crump, to respond, and Congressman Clyburn, I'd like you to weigh in. So let's hear from Congresswoman Wilson.
Rage, because I've touched all of those mothers. And in fact, I brought them to Washington to a forum called the Mothers of Murdered Children. And the rage that was exhibited in their hearts and the pain that I saw, I will never, ever forget it. And to live in that moment and to see this continue even to 2020. This all started with me bringing them when Trayvon was killed, through Michael Brown, through all of them that are in your clip. They came to Washington and served in a forum with me, and we called it the Mothers of Murdered Children. So it's rage. It's the realization that racism is still alive and well in America today.
Brother Lawrence, it is certainly part of the police culture and behavior as evidenced by those tragedies, those miscarriages of justice, that excessive abuse of force that happens over and over again. They happen so fast that we can't keep up with the hashtags. I mean, they're killing our children, and it goes much deeper than just the police. This is about systematic racism. It really goes back, when we think about it, while America is dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, we in Black America are not only dealing with that pandemic, but we're also dealing with the pandemic, the 1619 pandemic, which represents the first year that enslaved Africans were brought to America. And from that time to this one, 401 years later, we've been dealing with this systematic racism and oppression that shows us evidence that there are two justice systems in America, one for Black America and one for white America, when we should have equal justice for every citizen in the United States of America. When I'm in the courtroom, I challenge the jurors when we're doing jury selection. I say, I know you can quote the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, but I want to know, do you believe it when you say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that amongst them are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness? Well, that means Black people to America, and that's not what we saw in those videos that we just watched. And it's a much deeper problem than just policing.
I agree with Attorney Crump that the problem is much deeper than law enforcement. It's a cultural problem, and I think we all know that. This country has never reconciled the fact that the people who occupy this country came here upon a totally different set of circumstances. And our entire society is built upon those two pillars. The first one, people who came here of their own free will, looking for freedom. Freedom to express and freedom to worship, looking for freedom. But they came of their own free will. Then there's another group of people that came here, and we are in that group, against their will. They came chained and were enslaved. Now, everything in our society, including law enforcement, had been built upon those two pillars. White people who came of their own free will in search of freedom, and black people who came against their will and were enslaved. And law enforcement and everything else in our society has taken on that mantra. And that is what we're living with. Now, as Attorney Crump said, according to the preamble in the Constitution itself, we have been constantly in search of a more perfect union. And that search periodically is challenged. I can go down through the history. I used to teach this stuff, and I don't want to be too professorial here today, but I can go down through history and look at all the things that have happened when we were taking steps forward. For instance, the Emancipation Proclamation was a giant step forward, both of them. One dealing with the District of Columbia, the other dealing with other slave states. Those were steps forward in this pursuit. And the Emancipation Proclamation ushered in the period of Reconstruction. A lot of people don't realize Reconstruction didn't last for 12 years. Reconstruction was over in 1877. And we moved into a period of Jim Crow. And we know what Jim Crow means.
Certainly.
It means apartheid. And that lasted until 1954. So 244 years of slavery and another 100 years of second-class citizenship. And all through those 3 centuries, we've been establishing a system based upon 2 pillars. And we've never been able to reconcile those differences. That's our challenge.
So let me pick up on that point. The 2 pillars that you raised, and the fact that we've been pursuing this quest for a more perfect union. And as elusive as it's been, there tend to be progress made. So we take a couple of steps forward, and for some reason we slip backwards. So what I'd like to do is actually go to something a little more recent in terms of progress made and a sense of recognition, because the idea of racism, it has a spectrum to it. So I started with depraved indifference. You talked about, and Attorney Crump talked about the institutional nature of it. You even talked about the cultural piece of it. So let us look at a slide that talks about sometime in the 60s, where we had the leadership of our government coming to grips with this under former President Lyndon Baines Johnson. And it's something called the Kerner Report. So let's bring some aspects of that up if you can, and I'll talk through it and have our majority whip respond to that.
Here's what one prominent citizen at the time had to say about this report, and I'll quote, "This is a physician's warning for approaching death with a prescription for life." That prominent citizen was Martin Luther King Jr. The report goes on to state, our nation is moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. The report was a strong indication and indictment of white Americans, because specifically it's saying, quote, "What white Americans have never fully understood and what the Negro can never forget is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it." So we're talking about structural racism here. Further, the report recommends the hire of a more diverse and sensitive police force. So here it is in black and white 60 years ago. The Kerner Commission report really acknowledges that basically baked in our system, there is some form of racism in police executing the task. So let me hear your responses to that, because here we are 60 years later. It's a very difficult thing for a slice of society to actually come to grips with.
Well, I think the society understands all of this very, very clearly. The Kerner report was issued in 1968. President Lyndon Johnson, of course, was elected on his own. You know, he ascended to the presidency with the death or the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He got elected on his own in 1964. It's kind of interesting. Last night I did a Zoom event with a faith group up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I played for them a 3-minute clip of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1964, exactly 1 week before the elections. And the election in 1964 just happened to have taken place on November the 3rd. And he referred to November the 3rd, 3 different instances in that clip, and what confronted us as of November the 3rd. And if you were to read it, I'm gonna send it to Ben. If you were to look at that clip, you could really believe that he was giving that speech on the day before yesterday, 1 week before the election. Almost exactly wording that we would get today. Now, the problem with the Kerner report is it was resoundingly ignored in many quarters, rejected in others. There was never any attempt by the country to deal with the Kerner report. And you may recall when Bill Clinton was elected, we talked about a commission to really, once and for all, do something about this issue. He named John Hope Franklin to chair. I sat down with John Hope several times when he was developing that report. Nobody has ever seen the report. He finished it. He submitted it to the White House. Nobody has ever seen it, including those of us who participated in its development. This country has never faced up to the fact that there is a problem that we cannot ever solve until we get to the point of admitting that it is a problem. We've got Supreme Court justices going on the bench who will refuse to acknowledge whether or not Brown v. Board of Education, which is the decision that brought an end to separate but equal, will not say that it was rightly decided by the Supreme Court. It was a 9-0 decision. I submit to you that if that question were put before the current Supreme Court, that 9-0 resolution of that issue in favor of the NAACP legal defense funds position, I'll submit to you today it will be 6-3 against that. That to me is what we're confronted with. And that's why I think this election is so consequential. I think all elections are important. Some elections are more consequential than others. And I sincerely believe, and I've been saying this all over the country for the last 2 months, I believe this is the most consequential election for presidential election we've had in this country since 1860. The year that Abraham Lincoln was elected, 1860. This is the most consequential election since that time, because if this election does not result in a change of direction in this country, we're going to relive everything that we lived from 1877 down to 1954. I believe that sincerely. I hope I never have to say, I told you so.
I think it is inherent. I think like I said before, it started in slavery. I think the racism that's in police departments is not only in the policies, I think it's in the hearts of many police officers who feel that is exactly why they were hired, who feel as little boys that is exactly why they want to be a police officer. You have great policemen. I have great partnerships. I have to have great partnerships with the police in my district. But I've also been under a consent decree in Miami, where the police killed 7 Black men in 7 months in Miami-Dade County. And I had to step in and change the whole police department, because it's not just, there are laws that come from your capital, your state capital, that these police officers are trained, the way they're trained, the way they're certified, the way they're hired. Then you have laws that are passed that are roadblocks and tricks and turns and stumbles, and for these to block people from even getting around. Then you have public defenders who are defunded every year. Then you have Black people not wanting to serve on juries, so they find a way to get off juries. Then you have state attorneys who it's more comfortable to be friendly with the police than to buck the police. And then, so you have this whole system entwined with, hi, young man, you snatched the chain. So let me just direct file you, because if you go to court, they're gonna sentence you to 5 years. So come this way, let me direct file you. I have seen this over and over. And as a people, and as the commission that I just founded, I'm gonna address all of these issues that I'm pointing out to you. Because it's a whole systemic system that has been going on for years that causes the police to be the way they are. And sadly, we talk about hiring police officers who look like us, and police officers, women police officers. In some communities, they are worse. They're even more cruel, more unrelenting. more willing to give you just a second chance. So it's systemic, and it's racism throughout, and it's culture.
It's culture. Yeah.
Your heart, what you believe in it, what you believe your job is.
So
how you have come from a little boy wanting to be this policeman so you can be in charge of some Black people and beat them up.
I'm very familiar with the Kerner Commission report, and I have often been quoted on CNN, Good Morning America, MSNBC, and different platforms of talking about these two societies that exist that was acknowledged 60 years ago. And I think in many ways, they exist because of the legalized genocide of colored people, which is the title of my book. It talks about how we have we engage in the intellectual justification of discrimination to maintain this status quo of keeping marginalized people of color down here and elevating white culture and white society. And even though we fought the Civil War and we won the Civil War, many still could not divorce themselves from this notion of having slave labor / prison labor / free labor. And that's why we have this prison industrial complex, this school to prison pipeline, where you have in states like Florida and Tennessee and Texas, 1 out of 5 Black men are convicted felons. And the experts opine if this trend continues, in the next 25 years, 1 out of every 3 Black men will be convicted felons. So we have a lot of work to do, Brother Lawrence, to stop this epidemic, this disease of racism for continuing to proliferate throughout American culture and society, because we can do better, America. We can have a more just society where George Floyd has an opportunity to take a breath, where Breonna Taylor has an opportunity to sleep in peace, where Ahmaud Arbery has an opportunity to run free and not be lynched for jogging while Black. And all of our children have an equal opportunity at the American dream. We can do a better America, and we must do better America.
So, you know, we're dwelling on this, obviously, because this is law and order. And in pursuing this, we're going beyond an inch deep. So we are working our way through this sense of issues that we need to grapple with. The sense of issues meaning trying to arrive at the problem. What is the problem? Why is this continuing? And so as we grapple for that, it's difficult not to address an issue, the elephant in the room, which is qualified immunity. So several months after George Floyd, we've had more shootings. And some would argue that it's merely the latest in the long line of incidents of egregious police misconduct. And so this pattern continues. It continues because police are legally, politically, and culturally insulated from the consequences of violating the rights of the people whom they are sworn to serve. So I would say some would say the doctrine of qualified immunity is providing a shield, and that shield in some cases is that of absolute immunity. So is that far-fetched in your view, Congressman Clyburn? And tell us where we are from a federal initiative, because that's really your bailiwick.
Well, as you know, you may know, I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't get hung up in the nuances of the law. I do read legal opinions, and I think it was Justice Sotomayor, maybe, who looked at qualified immunity and saw it as an inoculator or an insulator. I forgot what term she used for police officers, no matter how egregious their acts may be. But I will tell you what I've done politically. I've been working on this issue with the Justice in Policing Act. We passed it in the House. We sent it over to the Senate. The Senate is still grappling with it. And it's my hope that in the next Congress, we will get something done, which means I'm hoping that we get a Senate that will at least pass something and a president who will sign something. But that deals with that one issue, that is qualified immunity. How we change that so that it won't be what it is today, I don't know. I'm gonna leave that up to Brother Crump to bring those issues to us. But I'm gonna tell you what I am doing. As you may imagine, I have been reached out to by various people on the Biden's transition team, and I've made it very clear. I'm staying in the House of Representatives, and one of the things that's a priority for me, and I've asked them to take a look at whether or not they will be willing to form not a Kerner Commission, or whatever we may have called a commission that John Hope Franklin chaired, but a commission that will look at the consequences intended and unintended of the 1986 and the 1994 crime bills.
Okay.
Given 1 year to study those two crime bills and to make recommendation to hopefully the new president on what we can do to rectify what occurred as a result. Now, the reason we want to look at this, because I think we have to be careful here. The 1994 crime bill had the Violence Against Women in it. The Violence Against Women Act was in that bill. The 94 crime bill had pattern and practice investigation of the police departments. That's what we used up in Ferguson after Michael Brown was murdered. So that is in the crime bill. We don't want to throw out, and people keep talking about, we need to get rid of the 1994 crime bill. It had assault weapons ban in it. It had drug courts in it. And so there are a lot of things there. There were good things. There were some unintended consequences when it came to incarcerations, and that's what we got to look at. Look at the 1986 crime bill, look at the 94 crime bill, and within 1 year, make the recommendations so that we can rectify that and cleanse some of these records. Crump just told me 1 in 3 African Americans being convicted felons. We need to throw out a lot of those convictions for non-violent convictions flowing out of the drug culture when people should be going to hospitals rather than to jails. And so that's where I'm going from here. I'm gonna let Crump and the rest of them talk about qualified immunity. I want to talk about rectifying this problem.
Well, it certainly is true what you say. The United States has instituted this notion of qualified immunity that literally gives the police instructions on how to make sure they get a get out of jail free card when they kill a marginalized person in America. And all they have to say, Brother Lawrence, is just 3 words. I felt threatened. I felt fear. And the Supreme Court said that's enough. It doesn't matter what objective evidence we have to contradict the police subjective notion of fear, because they say you can't Monday morning quarterback, you weren't there, and the police have the hardest job in the world. Well, when you look at the statistics, some would argue it may be harder to be a Black man in America. It certainly is more dangerous than being a police in America. And so we have to continue to challenge this legalized genocide of colored people. We have to speak truth to power every chance we get. I think so often about what Dr. Martin Luther King said in the letter from the Birmingham jail. He said, just because they say it's legal, that doesn't make it right. He said everything that Hitler did to the Jews in Germany was legal, but that didn't make it right. Slavery was legal, but that didn't make it right. Segregation was legal, but that didn't make it right. And just recently, they tried to tell us executing this innocent Black woman, Breonna Taylor, in her own apartment while they executed a dangerous, unconstitutional, and senseless no-knock warrant was legal. But I submit to you, Brother Lawrence, that does not make it right. And we have to continue to tell America, if you're going to call yourself a moral country, if you're going to say that you are a good country, you cannot see injustice and look the other way.
I think this is something that is long overdue. And once we win that battle under a new administration, see, now all of this, George Floyd's murder has brought all of these issues to the surface again.
Mm-hmm.
And now that they have brought these issues to the surface again, in the meantime, Congress has brought a commission to the surface again within the Congressional Black Caucus. So we have a responsibility to lobby the new president, if he doesn't understand, to lobby the new Attorney General, and to lobby the brand new Senate majority, if they don't understand, on what qualified immunity, how doing something about that will change what is happening in America today as it relates to criminal justice and police officers and their misconduct and their brutality and the feeling that they can do just about anything they want to do, and nothing will happen to them. They will receive no punishment, nothing. No, they won't even get a reprimand. So we've got to stop that. And we're on a mission.
Yeah.
And we're doing this at the right time because you can help us do it.
Well, I also hear in your response that we shouldn't anticipate that this is going to happen overnight. We need to be in it for the long haul. So we tend to fight hard. We come out when there's time to protest and we're out there, but we don't fight long. So we've got to look at this beyond the next election cycle. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me say this to you. This commission does not expire. Most commissions expire. This commission has no expiration date, and I made sure that it had no expiration date because I know this is not going to be easy, but I've done these things before. And you've just got to be, you've got to have the right people on your side, to have the Senate, the present Senate, to pass something like this was almost like the parting of the Red Sea. So these were my senators, Republican senators, 2 of them, and Florida senators, Republicans. And if you can cajole them and help them understand, we can do this with just about anybody else.
This segment of episode 1 deals with mass incarceration. So we do have a graph that gives you a depiction of what actually occurred I'm not sure that members of this panel actually need that. Essentially, we're 5% of the world population and 26% of the prison population. And so we've seen the numbers rise dramatically in the 70s and 80s, and it was attributed to low-level offenders with long prison sentences compounded with, 3 strikes you're out. But we saw a major change when there is opioid and opioid abuse. So back in the 80s, we had people saying, hold up for a moment. We can't incarcerate ourselves out of this problem. But yet it continued to go on. Today, we see a marked change. When it comes to the issue of opioid, it is treated as a medical issue. And so the question is this: did we become just more enlightened at this stage of game? Or is there a double standard? How do you respond to that?
We clearly understand it was a double standard. It was always a double standard, Brother Lawrence, when we think about the sentencing for powder cocaine versus crack cocaine. The powder cocaine being more common, more expensive in the white community, where they got a slap on the wrist, and Black people got sentenced for decades in regards to addiction to crack cocaine. But then it gets even more profound when you do compare the crack epidemic and the opioid epidemic. I mean, they incarcerated generations of Black people. And I mean, Jess said it was the most heinous crime, but when white people suffered very similar fates, they won't even let them have it in their employment records. It is only a medical issue, and it is a confidential medical issue. That's how much they go to try to protect the white community from having their issues exploited to populate the prison industrial complex. And what really hits me is the fact that when you think about marijuana and you think about little Black and brown people spending 10 years, 20 years, some life in prison for selling marijuana, even though in most states in America now it is legal. And you literally have where mostly white men and the government are going to make billions and billions of dollars from the legalization of marijuana. And when you put it in its most simplest layman terms, Brother Lawrence, what you have is the government is now going to be in the business of selling marijuana to make money to pay their bills. Now, when little Black people were selling marijuana to make money to pay their bills, they put all of us in jail, and they will lock us up and throw away the key. You know, as an attorney, we in the legal community, we watch hundreds and hundreds of people in our community be locked up for selling these low-level amounts of marijuana. And they would always say, Brother Lawrence, we got to be hard on crime. We got to be hard on these drugs because we got to send a message. We got to lock them up. We got to throw away the key. And they kept saying that over and over because they said they're poisoning the community. They're poisoning the community. And that's what they would continue to say. And then we come to Flint, Michigan, because I represent thousands of citizens in Flint, Michigan, where they actually did poison the community. And you know how many people went to jail? Not one.
I don't think anyone was hit as hard as the Black community. And I don't think any sex was hit as hard as the Black man. And if we concentrate on that and that alone, we will climb out of the hole that we find ourselves in. And I say this with authority, and I'm saying it because I mean it, and because I'm tired of the mixing.
So is it time for decriminalization as it relates to that?
This criminalization as it relates to drugs. We also have to look at the people who are presently in prison for non-violent drug offenses, who are there, who have been over-sentenced. And we need to stop criminalizing drugs. And in some cities, that has already happened. And we're fighting here in our own city to decriminalize marijuana to the point that we have set up all kinds of oversight committees. And I think this is happening around the United States. And it's sad because it was only initiated because we have an opioid epidemic. And the opioid epidemic is white and brown.
Okay.
And so it mirrors that 1 in 3 Black man who I referenced at the beginning of this. That's who we need to be concerned about right now, because the dichotomy is so stark. The way that this country responded to the opioid addiction problem, to the crack cocaine era. And all of us who are Black should be so clear and so on a mission.
The unintended consequences of these bills, you get to something that Frederica just mentioned. And that is, and I think you mentioned as well, when you arrest people for crimes, it's up to the prosecutor to classify that crime. And what has been happening to Black people is the prosecutor classify this crime as the highest level. If you remember, Trump said, arrest them and use the highest possible charge that you can use. And that's what they do to help perpetuate this double standard. It is a double standard. How else do you get, the scientists say there's no difference in powder cocaine and crack cocaine. That's what the scientists say. But Congress had a law, and that was passed back in the 80s. It was the law before I ever got to Congress. I got there in 92. So this is not anything to apply to the 1994 crime bill that so many people try to do. But 100 to 1, the penalty for crack cocaine was 100 times greater than the penalty for powder cocaine. And the scientists said there's no difference. So why? It's because crack cocaine was a drug of choice in the Black community and powder cocaine in the white community. That's the kind of stuff when I said we got to talk, got to do this study and look at all of these charges. We got to see, why is this young man sitting in prison for life? 3 times and you out, sentenced for life with 3-time conviction, even if all 3 of them were for possession of marijuana. It's up to the prosecutor to determine whether it's simple possession or some other kind of possession. So you put mandatory minimums on the judge and leave all discretion up to the prosecutors. And they are the ones who are putting our young men and women away from life.
And so this whole war on drugs was always an attack on minority communities, even from the very beginning. When you think about when they criminalized marijuana, it had everything to do with trying to target Mexicans for their spiritual and cultural use of marijuana, because marijuana had been in America, cannabis had been in America for a long time. But in the 1930s, they noticed that these little short people who didn't look like them and didn't speak their language, and white people didn't really like that. And so they came up with a way to try to criminalize their culture, as they do so often with African Americans, criminalize the culture, and we can predict who the criminals would be. And so they literally said, we're gonna say this marijuana, as was referred to by Mexicans, was a bad thing. And so they started criminalizing it in cities and then states. And then in the United States Congress, and you don't have to take my word, I write about it in my book, Open Season, Legalized Genocide of Colored People. It came up before the United States House of Representatives to have federal regulation to make marijuana illegal. And you know what the winning argument was for making marijuana illegal in America? If we don't make it illegal, white women will smoke it and want to sleep with black men. And from then on, they have had this war on drugs. And so we have to always try to engage our communities, educate our communities, empower our communities to speak truth to power.
You mean black on black crime?
Well, the answer to that, because
the answer to that is education. The answer to that is intervention. The answer to that is training and making sure that every single solitary child who does not have appropriate guidance receives it, and who does not have the appropriate parents receive appropriate guidance, making sure that they stay in school. There's no in between.
Yeah.
There's no dropout. There's no coming back. You start school, you stay in school. And as a people, we need to stop getting on the expressways and the interstate and driving over the lower income areas in Black communities. We need to be riding on the street, and we need to be mentoring in schools, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And we need to say to these little Black boys whose fathers are missing, incarcerated, or just not involved, I am here. I will help you. Do not fear. We will guide you. A little Black boy is raised to feel so devalued. If a group of them are walking towards anyone, even walking towards a Black man, he will cross the street because he's afraid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Get on an elevator, everybody wants to get off. When you pull up to a stop sign, if you see a Black boy standing on the street, people grab their purse, because that is what society has said we must be. These Black boys grow up feeling so disjointed, they don't know what they are. They are caricatures of real men, because this is how society has perceived them. So as a people, we've got to come off our high horse, come down to where these boys are. And we've got to talk to them, and we've got to change this. This can't go on forever. This has to stop, and it has to stop now. With that same commission that I told you about, it has to stop with that. It has to stop with President Biden, because he understands. And I will lobby him every single day of his presidency.
Where do we go from here?
Well, it's kind of interesting. In preparation for election cycles, I always look at what's going around us, look at the headlines in the newspapers, what's coming out on the evening news, and then I go and research what book that I could look to for some instructions as to how to respond. 2 years ago, in preparation for the election cycle, I went back and took a look at Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. When he talked about, to me it summed up when he says, America's greatness is not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to repair its faults. And I horned that during the election season. But for this cycle, I went back and picked up Martin Luther King Jr.'s book, his last book.
Okay. What was the
Which
title?
was, where do we go from here?
Okay.
Chaos or community? You can't be more poignant, but I'm beyond the promise. I ain't got a whole lot of time left. I got to do something. We got to do something quick.
So we've got to begin right here. We've got to realize that when we intervene in the lives of these Black children in pre-K, what is it that they need? When a woman has a baby, they say, Miss Wilson, it's a boy. They don't say, Miss Wilson, it's a murderer. So what happens from the time that baby is a boy until he reaches 11 years old and he has the courage to pick up an AK-47 and shoot someone in his neighborhood or break into your house? What gives him that courage? What makes him that murderer? Now that's where we have to start. It's not the police. It's not the laws. It's what society and we have done to him. So we as a people, we've got to own up to that, and we've got to rectify that, and we've got to work with that. And we have to, as Black people, we need to take a pledge that we're going to reach down and pull up and help these children. We have to do that, because that's what it's going to take. You think that the governor cares about little Black boys shooting up their community? You think that the mayor cares? You think that anybody cares? You think the superintendent of schools cares? No. If they cared, it wouldn't be happening. So we have to garnish and gather those who do care. And we've got to change it. And I know we can change it, because I've changed it.
Well, Congresswoman, with the motion, with the conviction, you've given us a prescription to how we take steps towards a more perfect union. We want to thank you for taking the time on really 8 days before a major election to spend with us. And we thank you, we thank you, we thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care.
It can't just be about criminal justice reform. It also has to be about economic development and access to capital. My good friend, Senator Kamala Harris, and I, we talk often, and she talks about in communities where they have a robust economy, where you have jobs, where you have a good education system, where you have stable employment, you see less crime. And so what we have to do in marginalized minority communities is try to build up the infrastructure so people don't feel that they have to resort to crime, and they see hope. And when you see hope, you fight for it. But when there's no hope, you resort to trying to survive by any means necessary. And so what we have to continue to do is make America live up to its high ideals. We have to make America live up to the Constitution. As my personal hero, Thurgood Marshall said, you know, the basis of the American Constitution is simply this, that a Black baby born to a Black mother, the most uneducated Black mother, the most inarticulate Black mother, the most impoverished Black mother, has the same exact rights as a white baby born to a white mother, the most educated white mother, the most articulate white mother, the most affluent white mother, just by virtue of that baby drawing its first breath as an American. Now, Justice Marshall said, I know that's not the case in America today, but I challenge anybody to say that's not a goal worth fighting for. I challenge anybody to say that's not what makes America the great beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. So when we fight for the Trayvon Martins of the world, but more importantly, Brother Lawrence, when we fight for the unknown Trayvon Martins of the world, when we fight for whom my grandmother called the least of these, as she references the Bible, to have an equal opportunity at the American dream, what we are really doing is helping America to live up to its creed. What we're really doing is helping America to be the great beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. But most importantly, Brother Lawrence, what we are doing is helping America to be America for all Americans. Thank you. It was my pleasure to be on this panel, Brother Lawrence, with these great leaders, Frederica Wilson and James Clyburn.
We have come to the end of this evening's program. We want to thank our Grand Bosselist, Dr. David Marion, our distinguished panel members, Congressman James Clyburn, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, and Attorney Benjamin Crump. We would like to thank our moderator, Derickson Lawrence. I want to remind our audience that this is episode 1 of 7. So stay tuned for episode 2 in early 2021. Finally, on behalf of Alpha Chapter and the Brothers of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, stay safe and good night.